This week, it's almost beta time for Cosmic. Looking Glass looks really interesting. There's controversy at the kernel and more. You don't want to miss it, so stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is the Untitled Linux Show, episode 200, recorded Saturday, April the 26th. Who needs a desktop anyway? Hey folks, it is Saturday, and you know what that means. It's time to get geeky with Linux and open source and software and gaming and hardware, all kinds of fun stuff. We're going to have fun today. It is the 200th episode of the Untitled Linux Show, and in another 56 episodes or so, we'll actually get to a mathematically significant round number, and we'll have to celebrate that one. But I've got some co-hosts here. It's not just me. I've got Jeff and Rob. Welcome, guys. Glad you're both here.
And Jonathan, I have to correct you. This is episode 200, but this is a 201st episode. We started on episode 0.
Yes. Well, you know, so I guess episode 255 is the one we'll really have to celebrate.
Yes.
Makes sense. I can deal with that. So we've got some news to talk about, and up first is some desktop news. We've got a couple of things going on here. Rob's going to talk about Cosmic, and then we're going to talk about Ubuntu as well, because, well, you'll see. Rob, take it away. Tell us what's new with Cosmic, and then we'll go from there.
So this week, System 76 announced the release of Alpha 7 of their Rust-based Cosmic desktop. And if you've seen the blog post itself, they had a lot of fun with it. Starting out by saying, ISO excited. That's ISO, you know what ISO? ISO excited. And going on to explain the bug fixes and must-haves before the big beta behemoth. As in behemoth, beta behemoth. And I missed the caption at the top. It says Cosmic Alpha 7, never been beta. Never been better, never been beta. So all this really to gear us up, to let us know we are just about done with the alpha phase of the releases, and beta is just around the corner. But with Alpha 7, well, and also, you know, I believe with this, you know, beta coming soon, I believe my prediction for the year was something around the final release, maybe being by the end of the year. I don't remember, but we're making headway there. But even though we aren't there yet, this release brings some new features I'm so excited for too.
That's terrible.
It is.
So top of the list is the new workspace feature, or there's new features to Workspace, which is their name for virtual desktops. So now workspaces can now be moved by clicking and dragging. So you can reorder your workspaces on the current display or move them across displays to your liking. You can also, there's now a pinning workspaces, which will keep it from being removed when it's empty, because the normal behavior, if there's nothing in that workspace, it just goes away. But you could pin it if you want to keep a workspace for whatever reason you want to keep it. There are also a bunch of accessibility features, such as high contrast mode, color filters, add a filter to address common forms of color blindness. There's color inversion, which changes theme colors using a different calculation for the purpose of helping those affected by color blindness. There's mono sound, which aids those with hearing loss by combining left and right sound channels into a single channel for both ears. Plus, there's improvements to the magnifier. And, you know, accessibility has been one of those long-time complaints that Linux has been getting better and better at. But it's been a complaint over the years that I've seen listed. So it's nice seeing them address these things right out of the gate before they even get to the final release, rather than making sure it works and then now let's make it right. So they're kind of trying to really get things right out of the get-go. And there's also tooltips have been added when hovering over items in the app tray, workspaces, app library and launcher. There's global shortcuts for applications, which allow you to use an application-specific shortcut even if the application is not in focus. This is especially useful for features like push to talk or push to mute. But it's not on by default because, I mean, you don't want, if you're not expecting that behavior, you don't want to be typing something away and hit that push to talk button and start saying something to someone you don't want to be saying it to. So there's also new scaling settings for X-Whale and fractional scaling, which gives Cosmic a better approach for handling fractional scaling with X11 applications. A seek-ahead search option has been added to the file browser. A left-right balance scale has been added to sound settings to control the weight of sound in each ear, which maybe that's handy if for also in the accessibility, as you know, if one ear hears better than the other, you can kind of shift that sound over a little bit. And there's just a huge list of bug fixes. I mean, definitely to be expected when you're in the alpha stage. And as hinted in the top of the blog post, I'm so excited. You can download the new Cosmic 7 ISO now and try it out yourself, which I have. I've tried it out myself. But one thing I noticed when I went and found that download link, I noticed they had a list of other distros. And you know, we talked previously, I couldn't come up with all the names, but there's a list right on the download page of all the other distros and spins, instructions you can get for getting Cosmic on. I don't know if they're all up to date yet, but maybe some of them are, maybe they aren't. But that list includes Fedora Cosmic Spin, Fedora Cosmic Atomic. I wrote that down in my notes wrong, but I knew that's wrong. Fedora Cosmic Atomic, that is. So Nixos, Arch, OpenSUSE, Aaron OS, Redux OS, and Casio OS. So there's, you know, a lot of cool things. As nice as Linux Mint Cinnamon has been for me, really Cosmic is kind of the desktop environment I really want to be running full time. So please hurry and get this done, and you'll help out my prediction too if you get this done. But to speed that along, today I found that they have at system76.com/donate. You can donate some money to them, which I did today to just incentivize getting this thing going so I can actually run this on my production machine, which I could run it on my production machine if I wanted to, but you know, it's alpha for a reason, so I'm not going to do that. But yeah, it's you know, slick as always, getting closer and closer.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts about this. One, it is, and there'll be a callback to this later in the episode. It'll be super interesting. It's fascinating to me that Fedora is shipping this not fully released software, and boy, I sure hope that doesn't bite anybody. There'll be a callback to that. And then it's also, I kind of like the fact that System 76 is really taking their time with this, that they're not in a hurry. They don't feel any pressure to rush. Yes, they're way behind their predicted schedule, but that's okay. They're trying to get it all polished up and not release anything that's a stinker. And that also fascinates me because one of the other stories that I came across this week is about Ubuntu and some problems with Ubuntu 2504, particularly doing in-place upgrades.
And Kubuntu specifically.
Some of those are specific to Kubuntu, not all of them. There's about 4 different really bad bugs that they have discovered. And it is bad enough that they have temporarily suspended the ability to do an in-place upgrade to 2504. And I believe that's from 2410 to 2504. I don't know whether that suspension has been released or not. There's not been an update to this post, so as far as I can tell, it's still not possible. But yeah, you could break your desktop really bad trying to update from 2410 to 2504. And Jeff, you did it, didn't you?
I did. So to harken back a couple of weeks ago, I covered this, and we went over if you have Steam installed in 24.10 and we go and you try to upgrade to 25.04, it would uninstall your desktop. Now,
you didn't need that anyways.
yeah. Now you can drop to a command prompt and do a sudo space app space install space Kubuntu desktop, and it will reinstall your desktop and you'll be fine. You could also uninstall Steam and then it would upgrade just fine. The other that I ran into was if you do an update during upgrade, it wouldn't install one of the kernel files into the image directory. So it would not allow it to boot because it was like, I'm going to boot, but there's nothing there. It was missing a file.
Yeah, you need those.
So if you didn't, as long as you just didn't do the upgrade during the install, then you were okay. Afterwards, you can upgrade and everything went fine. Same way with the not having the desktop. Once you're in 25.04 and it's working, there's no problems. It's just the upgrade process where the problems are occurring, or that I know of.
I've got to admit, I've multiple times gone to upgrade Fedora from one release to the next, and ended up with a not booting desktop for various fun reasons. Right, so it happens.
Yeah, I had that as well when I had Fedora. It oops.
But Ubuntu is supposed to be the one that's user friendly and not do stuff like that.
True. And now I honestly thought they had it fixed because I was back in the beta and I actually talked
in beta. Yeah.
And I talked to one of the people that helps package and develop Kubuntu, and they knew of it and they were going to fix it. And so I don't know if it didn't, something else kind of reared its head, or I just learned of this.
So what happened, guys?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they fixed it and then something else broke it again, or they fixed it and something similar happened.
Yeah, maybe it's not the same bug.
It just may not be exactly the same thing. Yeah, it happens.
And at least, like I said, as far as I know, as long as you're in if you're in 25.04, you're fine.
It's the upgrade. It's the upgrade process.
That's the process.
I do want to remind people, for those people thinking, see, that's why I don't use Linux. I've had the same thing happen with
good
Windows
Lord.
desktop,
Windows upgrades can be
Windows
terrible.
Servers.
Yeah.
I've had a server happen this year that wouldn't boot up after an upgrade. So it's not just a Linux thing.
And you know the difference? On a Windows machine? How do you fix that? There's really one fix. You redo a reinstall. I mean, you can try messing around with SFC and DISM and try to get a clean image from DISM and all of that. But on a failed upgrade with a non-booting system, here's your install disk, man. You get to do a reinstall with Windows.
So like this last one I had, that's what I thought I was going to have to do. You know, for those familiar with Windows, when you boot it up, it has those like boot up with no GUI, or boot up with networking, boot up or safe mode with networking, and whatever all those other options were. There's one way down there. I think it's boot up without antivirus. I didn't get that far. The server was a VM, and I asked our system administrator, I'm like, just roll this thing back. And he went in there and he tried them all. He even tried that last one and got it to boot. So he tried that. He told me, I got to boot here. Went in there, I removed the last update and blocked that update from being installed. But so there was another option, but I was pretty sure, I thought it was just, okay, well, nuke it, reinstall.
Yeah.
Restore from backup.
And one difference too is for users that maybe are newer and don't realize this, your home directory you can put on a different partition in Linux. So I had to reinstall the OS, but when it comes up, it has all my preferences. My wallpaper comes up, and say I don't have Firefox loaded. Well, when I load Firefox, it sees its preferences, which are all stored in the home directory. It has all my settings. It has all my links. There's no setup. I just have to install it and it's taken care of. So a reinstall on Linux, it's like 5 minutes.
But maybe. Even if you don't want to do that, if you really want to go in and fix it, there's a way you can boot into something, root over to it,
Yeah.
and you're at a command line, and you can do anything you need to do almost. So there's usually more options.
Yeah, this is the thing that's driven me crazy about Windows for the longest time. Is it is a patch tower, like it's a patch monster. You know, you've got the original install files, and then when you download updates, you're essentially downloading patches for those files, and it gets to be terrible. Whereas with Linux package managers, you're literally just downloading snapshots that have the current files in them. And so, you know, if something breaks, all you have to do is reinstall one of those packages, one of those file snapshots, and you know that you have the right files and you just installed them from a trusted source. And part of the reason why we can do that on Linux is because copyright's not a problem. Like, we don't care that someone is downloading the system files for Fedora. But that's the point. That's the way it works. Whereas over on Microsoft world, they do care, and they don't want just anyone to be able to grab some of these files. They've gotten a little bit better about that with downloading ISOs and such. But open source for the win. Makes it work.
And I could have dropped to a console and fixed that. I was kind of more after once I found the first error, I'm like, okay, let me troubleshoot this so I can feed back into the developer channel. And
and along the lines to what you did, with Linux, it's often just really easy to reinstall me back to where you were. Whereas like this Windows server, if I had to reinstall, it's often restoring your files from backup, reinstalling everything, finding your license keys for everything. So reinstalling one is often a lot easier than the other.
Yep. All right, Jeff, let's talk about Intel. Our other, well, no, I can't do that anymore. Intel used to be sort of in the same category as Microsoft, or at least some people, but no, they're sort of one of the good guys now, sort of.
Well, they're taking their lumps for sure.
Yes, that they are doing. What's new there?
So Intel has had its ups and downs this year, and unfortunately, it's been more downs than ups. The 200 series Arrow Lake processors have faced challenges on multiple fronts, and in several areas, they're slower than previous generation CPUs, Intel CPUs. Though they do come with benefits like lower power requirements and improved performance in certain benchmarks. It's kind of more of a specific rather than general improvement. This week, I have a pair of stories in the show notes, one good and one not so good. So let's start with the not so good first. If you've been following the tech press, you've likely heard about the boost that the 200 series processors have received. Essentially, it's new overclocking profile enabled through a BIOS update, promising higher frequencies, faster die-to-die communication, and it take more power. They turned up the power to make it go faster. Now, while the Windows benchmarks exist, I haven't really looked at them because, well, Windows. Instead, let's check out what Michael Larable found for Linux. So looking at all the benchmarks, unfortunately, there's not much of an improvement. It's largely business as usual. That's not to say there isn't any improvement at all, but gains are pretty minimal. Michael theorizes that there could be some extra performance due to an interaction with a Windows driver, because Windows did see more of an improvement, or so they say. But for Linux users, don't expect any noticeable changes. It's not really going to hurt you. It's just, okay, maybe it's 1% better. It's very, very minor. Now, on to the better news. Before the BIOS update was released, Michael ran benchmarks to compare performance since the processor's initial launch in October. Now, these tests reflect the usual kernel updates, schedule improvements, BIOS patches. So this isn't, just the normal BIOS improvements that you get over time. This wasn't the major performance BIOS update. And this is where things got interesting. There's actually a solid performance boost, particularly in single-threaded and lightly threaded applications. The short version, the scheduler has significantly improved. Tasks like game and high-load threads are now properly assigned to the P cores instead of the E cores. So when this processor first launched, the scheduler was in kind of rough shape. But now, out of the 400 benchmarks, there's an average 6% improvement in performance. So this is just normal updates you're getting. We'll have that 6%. And gaming in particular showed a notable boost. Now, I should mention there's some of those gaming benchmarks that they actually improved quite a lot. So it's really loading the performance cores like it should. Now, there are a few tasks that perform worse than they did on launch day, but the vast majority now run better. And I mean, it's probably 10 to 1. And most of them that perform worse are very minor. There's a couple standouts, but there's some, I think, corner case benchmark things, like web things that I don't think people are really going to see in day-to-day use. It's kind of just one of those corner case because the benchmarks a lot of times will hit code that your normal applications don't ever really use, or they use it such a small fraction of the time that it's not representative of the actual day-to-day workload. Now, if you want, take a look at the links in the show notes for the full battery of benchmarks so you can see if workloads that you do care about have changed and if there's any benefit you're missing out on. So
I have to wonder with the new boost mode, the Intel, the 200S boost performance mode, did Intel... So we had some Intel chips from generations past that began to fry themselves and permanently damage themselves. I had a customer that had a couple of those, and on Windows they were getting blue screens. And it took the longest time to figure out what it was. They were trying to work with the OEM to figure it out. And finally they mentioned it to me, and I'm like, could it be this thing that I've been reading about where Intel was cooking their chips by trying to run them too hard? So my guess is, as a result of that, Intel said, well, let's back this way down to be safe. And since then, they've given it, a bit more testing, and that we can turn the beans up a little bit on it. It kind of seems to me that's probably what's going on here.
Yeah, there was some manufacturing issues. They had some oxide getting into the developing in the chip, so that was causing issues. And you're right, they had limits, but they also kind of played fast and loose with them. And then the motherboard manufacturers could crank it up higher than they should because they want to look like they're a better, value than the competitor. So look, the chips run faster here. It's our better design. No, they just really turned them up beyond where they should. And then there was complaints that Intel didn't keep a lid on some of this stuff like they should have. And yeah, it was quite the mess. And
yeah,
it hurt them too, because they came out and they're like, oh, it performs worse in benchmarks. That didn't go over well either.
Never does. No. All
right.
You
say, Rob?
Yeah, Rob.
No, I just said,
All right. So we have a sort of an anniversary to talk about, and this is fun. So this is Tobias Bernard from GNOME put out a blog post. He calls it The Elephant in the Room, and he is talking about when what was his name? I think his name's in here somewhere. Anyway, there was a GNOME member, a fairly core GNOME member that almost exactly a year ago got removed from the project in a code of conduct enforcement. And those of you that have been around here for a while probably know that I am a little skeptical of code of conducts. More specifically, I have hesitations about the way that they can be used and enforced. And this is sort of a Sunny. That was the developer's name. It's Sunny. This is a really good example of a code of conduct being weaponized and then abused to kick someone out. Really for reasons that are not fully understood. And that's part of the problem here. And with a lot of code of conducts is that there's an opportunity to do things very secretly. And when you're talking about a public project, that's usually not what you want. So the author here, Tobias, goes through a bit of the history of what happened. And that was that a first-time code of conduct complaint against Sunny resulted in an immediate ban. A week later, the ban was suspended, and they said, oh, no, we're going to mediate. And then a few weeks later, the board elections happened, and the electorate, the people, were not informed about the ban. You kind of figured that maybe was something that should have been made public. 2 months after that, the ban was reinstated, he says, unilaterally against the wishes of the new board. And then he says there was an unsuccessful vote to remove the chairman of the COC, the Code of Conduct Committee, from the board and Code of Conduct Committee. Yeah, it's not great. Like, it's kind of a sordid history that he goes through, and I don't know that every code of conduct is as problematic or is necessarily going to be as problematic as this one was. But I think there are two key things that I can point to that I think it caused the problem here. The first is the ability for all this to be done in secret. And I understand that sometimes the things that happen that your code of conduct enforcement, like, so the original problem, and someone comes and complains about it, the person that complains maybe doesn't want their story to be shared publicly. I understand that, but keeping things secret is obviously in many cases a problem. So this is why, like, in the United States in particular, in our court system, one of the things that's considered a right is for the person being accused to fully understand what the accusation is, to be able to perform a defense against it. And sometimes those sorts of protections aren't quite there in code of conducts. But I think even the bigger problem is that, and in GNOME they did this, they had a code of conduct committee and a chairman of the code of conduct committee that was completely separate from the regular steering committee. And so what really seems to me to be problematic, and a big problem, is when your code of conduct enforcement people can be sort of their own gods unto themselves and are not necessarily taken from the broader community, like not taken from the people doing the work. And so in projects that I'm a part of, if someone comes up and they want to do a code of conduct, one of the things I always make sure to look for in what's being suggested is the people that are running the project, the people that already have the ability to kick someone out of the project, they are the ones that run the code of conduct enforcement and therefore have the ability to kick someone out of the project because of that. Because again, the last thing that you want is a group that is not accountable to the rest of the project, which is what sounds like happened here at GNOME, that kind of can run parallel to it, and then have the ability to eject someone from the project. So just some thoughts there as we hit almost a 1 year anniversary on this with GNOME. He's got some some comments, like, everyone on the Code of Conduct Committee and the board that were involved with this, you need to step down now and just go away. It's like, I know that you messed up. Please do the right thing. So it's still kind of a mess over at GNOME. And boy, I hate seeing this sort of thing, but it does happen, like politics. And I don't even mean like the partisan politics that we see in the United States or in anywhere around the world, but just like inter-project politics come up sometimes in various open source projects. And you hate to see the politics become the problem, right? Like, you hate to see that stuff take over, because pretty much all of us, all we really want to do is write cool code and make cool things. And I hate the idea that even though GNOME is not my favorite desktop, I hate the idea that GNOME is not doing as much cool stuff because there's this dumb code of conduct thing that got people messed up. And yeah, it's not fun. It's not something I wanted to talk about, but here we are.
like that didn't have any details of the reason, right? That has never been announced. From what I can tell, no one, like, outside of a very small circle, no one knows what actually happened, right? And sometimes the things that these code of conducts happen over are, sometimes they're really dumb. Sometimes they're really serious. Like, I grant you that. Sometimes they're really serious. One of the other things that drives me nuts that I really have a problem with is code of conduct enforcement for things that happened outside the project. And that has gotten some people. And that one I think is wrong as well. I'm going to say devil's advocate. I mean, they're keeping it confidential
Mhm.
and all, which is, something that's just, I guess, kind of respectful or whatever. But I would also maybe think if nothing happened or nothing serious, that maybe the defender, Sonny or whatever, may get his story out and say, like, this is what happened and this is why they're doing it.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the details. I've heard in other similar stories though that when someone is put in this position, they're just so blindsided by it. They don't really want to fight anymore. Because like this project that you've put so much of your time and effort into, you feel kind of betrayed and backstabbed. It's like once that happens, I know if I was in that position, it's like I'm not all that interested in fighting to be able to keep working on this project that just tried to stab me in the back. I would prefer to just walk away from it.
And I'm not even saying for fighting, but a lot of people want like revenge or to be vindicated and be like,
Mhm.
like, here's how much they suck. I did this.
Well,
Yeah.
to me, it's very anti-open source. I mean, now there's going to be reasons why something could happen, and you need to keep it private. But you would think there'd be at least some kind of, like if you're protecting a victim or something like that.
Mhm.
But in general, you should be able to go, here's what happened, here's and why we're doing it, and even in the case of a victim, there's a lot of times you could at least speak at a very high level. So it's like, here's kind of
there was physical abuse that happened, right?
Yes,
Like
yes.
you could say something like that, and everybody would go, "Oh, okay. We don't need to know the rest of the details. That's fine."
Right. So that you had that information, at least
Mhm.
idea, without pointing, without compromising the privacy of a victim.
Yep. So that's my thoughts. Sounds like you guys have at least some similar thoughts on it. And again, there's even in the link, there are things in there like he gets into some partisan stuff. It's like I don't want to touch on that. But the whole question of code of conducts, it's been weird to me ever since it became a thing, right? Because like, and here's the other side of this: you don't have to have a code of conduct for the leaders of a project to say, you know what, we're really not interested in working with that person anymore. Right? Like that happened before people started writing codes of conduct. Yeah. But the idea of having like this sort of shadowy second group of leaders of the project, it's a problem waiting to happen in many cases like this.
And I'm a big fan of checks and balances.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Group A can write their code of conduct. Group B is in charge of enforcing it.
I'm a big fan of checks.
Or somewhere that you have some responsibility in there of you can't just put all your eggs in one basket, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. To finish your thought, if Group A writes it and Group B is in charge of enforcing it, maybe Group A then gets to veto their decisions.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. There are ways. So sure, there are ways to set something like this up that's reasonable. It's just not every project. Not every project is willing to think through that. Not every project is willing to go, what happens if we get some really bad eggs that get voted into the Code of Conduct Committee? Like, and as a project leader, you really have to stop and ask yourself, like, what happens if multiple people in the project don't like me and want to kick me out of it? Am I giving them a way to do it by having a code of conduct? And that sort of thing does happen as well. So anyway, lots of stuff to think about there.
Did the article go into how it's affected the actual development of the GNOME desktop?
He talks about not specifically. No, he talks about how that it's a problem and that people have questions, but did not go into that.
I wonder just like if it really set it back, or they've been able to kind of continue on, or what happened. What's the from the desktop's point of development.
Well, we have a new release recently, so they did keep going one way or another.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Is it the GNOME Foundation that had financial problems?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's been other problems at the GNOME Foundation that we've talked about too. So,
do we know what his role was in Was he a developer? Do we know any of that? I mean, obviously somebody knows, but
I think he was a developer. He also, so in the comments, people have talked about how that so Sonny, there's a guy in the comments that says that Sonny Piers was my mentor during my GNOME internship. He was more than just a mentor. He gave me guidance, support, and a real sense of belonging in the community. So apparently he was involved with bringing other people into GNOME, helping the interns get started with writing code or doing whatever they were doing. So, a fairly important member of the community, from what I could tell. So, anyway, let's move on to happier and more technical things, although still risky things.
yeah.
Right, Rob?
We're going to talk about some risky options here. So, do you like to live on the edge? Want something new and exciting? Well, I've got a new and risky option for you. And it's orange. Well, the color isn't orange. The color is kind of a typical single board, blue, green, whatever, mix of colors, silver, all kinds of whatever. Anyway, but what I'm talking about is the new-ish Orange Pi RV2 board. So the board was released over a month ago, but what makes it more exciting this week is that Canonical has released Ubuntu 24.04 images for this Risc-v board. And Canonical really seems to be leading the way in Risc-v support is they keep releasing images for all these various Risc-v boards, like the Ubuntu powered deep computing Risc-v tablets and laptop last year. And there's been some other Risc boards we mentioned that Ubuntu jumped on. But if you're looking to get this one, the specs for this fun new-ish Risc-v SBC. Also, just to be clear, when I talk about single board computer or an SBC, think of things like the Raspberry Pi format. The Orange Pi, it's pretty much like a Raspberry Pi, but a different brand. It's someone else's version of the Raspberry Pi. How they make it. But so the Orange Pi RV2, the specs on it. So it's powered by the KY-X1 octa-core SoC, that's system on a chip, supporting RVA22 and vector extensions. A2 Top's AI accelerator is included, and it comes in a 248 gigabit LPDDR4X configurations. A pair of M.2 M key slots offer onboard storage options alongside a micro SD card slot, and available in configurations with eMMC storage ranging from 16 gigabits to 128. There are another thing that we've said is cool on other single board computers has 2 gigabit LAN ports. So you want to make a router, you got the 2 ports already built in. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm thinking. Has 5 USB ports, and HDMI out, GPIO, and onboard Wi-Fi 5 and Bluetooth 5.0 BLE. And the board is powered by USB-C power adapter. And if you're looking to get one, they are available at Amazon or AliExpress, and mine is already on its way. At Amazon, they had 2 gig, 4 gig, 8 gig, with the power supply, without, and there's one other option there. I can't remember what that was. But for those looking, you can kind of see a little picture of the board behind me. It's got, 2 LAN ports, HDMI here, USB there. There's a couple of USBs behind my head there. I think an aux port up here, I believe is what that is. So if you want to get into the Risc-v architecture, this little SBC might be a fun way to get started.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you have ordered yours, because mine is on the way too.
Great!
It's supposed to come tomorrow. Well, there you go.
Last time I ordered a little board that that you had also ordered. Was that a Risc-v board too? Yeah, it was. You
Probably
touched it, and mine is still in the box. But this one is what was that? That little board we got.
Was it this guy? The no, that's an Orange Pi 5. I have a whole bunch of these just right here. The Star 5, maybe?
The Star 5.
Is this guy?
Yeah. I feel like this seems a little more ready for prime time than the Star 5 was at that time.
Well, so one of the things, there's a Phoronix article about this too that I should go ahead and link to. Michael does some I think he does some benchmarking of it, at least of the CPU on there. And it's a decent bit faster than the Star 5. It is more like it's a little bit behind a Raspberry Pi 4, if I remember correctly. So yeah, it's an interesting little board. I'm actually getting one to potentially use as a GitHub runner to do automated builds as part of a GitHub CI. There's a couple in one of the projects I'm in. There's a couple of us that looked at this and went, "Oh, it'd be perfect for that," and so ordered a couple of them. It's got 8 gigs of RAM, which puts it in about the right amount to be able to do that. Yeah, do GitHub runs inside of like a Docker, probably Docker.
Yeah, if you want to go cheap, I think the cheapest on Amazon, I didn't even look at AliExpress, but the 2 gig was like $44, I want to say, and I think the 8 was somewhere around, with the power, I think it was like 70, and maybe it was like 66 without. I can't remember now, but yeah, it's subject to change, so it doesn't matter what I say, but it's ballpark.
Yep.
Yeah, it should buy something one of these days.
Yeah,
I'm the only one not getting the hardware dropped off every other week.
Every other week, more often than that, man.
I actually haven't really bought anything like that for quite a while. So
yeah, no, it's interesting. Risc-v is interesting to me. Risc-v has some problems though. One of the fact that it's so open and there's not some organization saying, this is what Risc-v looks like, is actually one of the problems with it, because there's not like a on Intel world on x86, there's like, there were the MMX extensions and the MMX2 extensions. And so you could kind of say, well, a processor made here and later, it's going to have these extensions. Well, that doesn't necessarily happen. It hasn't happened yet, I should say, for Risc-v, right? So there are extensions that can make Risc-v processors run with significantly more performance, but not every processor has them. And in fact, the implementation is not necessarily exactly the same across all of them. And so there's no like standardized, here's how you can compile against one of these modern Risc-v processors that have the faster extensions.
I feel like once distros become more mainstream on when they pick like a Risc-v board that's like good, and distros kind of start to focus around that, I feel like manufacturers are going to want to try to at least meet that standard, so that way there's already distros and stuff to run on there.
Yeah, it's kind of a chicken and egg problem, but I think we will get there. And I've said this about even the Vision 5 board, like it's barely good enough to get us to the point of being able to start working out the bugs in Risc-v. And then at some point, once you get the bugs worked out and the developers have tested it, then you can build the board that's actually going to be decent that people can use for real.
Well, that's the early problem ARM had, because I remember during the kernel development, they had a heck of a time building a kernel for ARM, because there was so many options out there that they were so unique that you had to have code to support each kind of variant.
That's still a mess. It's still no fun, but it's getting a bit better. One of the things that helped there actually is that there was a consortium of companies that came together and said, hey, let's talk about what would make for a server ready, system ready. I forget what they call it. There's this idea on ARM. It's like, well, you give it this kind of firmware and the firmware delivers to you this, which basically is ACPI. Here's all of the hardware that you need. And then the kernel just says, oh, well, I have all the drivers for this. Makes it come up and start working. As opposed to compiling a kernel specifically for that particular piece of hardware, which is terrible and nobody wants to do.
Apparently, Beagle board is also making the Beagle V or something. There's a Quippy posted that in the Discord. So
Yeah,
Another option.
I'd have to look at it. It does. It kind of depends, though, like how much computing power it has and how much RAM does it ship with.
Well, it has a lot fewer slots. It looks like there's IDE slots on there.
We've got a surprise guest.
Oh! Hey, I wanted to congratulate you.
Hey, Leo.
200 episodes. Good job.
Yeah, we were just talking about another 55 episodes, and we'll have a mathematically significant one.
Wait a minute. Let me think about that. Oh, you mean 1000 or something?
Yeah, episode 255, because we started with 0. So episode
good.
255 would be our
Will it be your
256th. Yeah, that's the one I'm going to celebrate.
Yay. Yay. Oh, I don't want to interrupt. I know you're in the middle, so I don't want to say anything. Hi, Jeff. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
And Rob, I know you from a distance, but not so much face to face. So it's nice
Good to see you, Leo.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were talking about Risc-v. We have another Risc-v board just got released.
I saw that little board. Yeah, that looks really cool.
Yeah. They're fun. A couple of us have them on the way.
They're not very fast though, right? I mean, honestly.
That's what we were just talking about. Like the ones that are out, they are barely fast enough for developers to be able to use to fix the problems with Risc-v.
Right.
And hopefully at some point they'll get fast enough that like real people are willing to use them.
Good. Yeah, no, I think the idea of an open source chip is a great idea. I mean, obviously. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were just talking though that it helps if we have kind of some kind of standards body to help control the silicon, so that when you try to write the kernel or some software for it, you have a kind of a base level of expectations you can have without
who controls Risc-v? I thought that was an open consortium.
Yeah, I don't know how much the consortium is willing to sort of dictate what's supposed to be on there. So like, when Intel went from 486 to 586 and eventually the Pentium and the Pentium 2, they sort of said, all right, these are the new extensions that CPU is going to have. And so then when AMD went to clone it, they said, well, we'll make the same extensions. Windows ran on it, Linux ran on it. There isn't anybody that's out there saying, okay, the next version of Risc-v, the one that's going to perform really well, these are the extra extensions it has to have. Right. And so manufacturers just kind of do the baseline, add their own custom stuff, and it's a pain for like the kernel to support it. So,
yeah, that's hard.
Yep.
But it is supported by more than one distro?
Yeah, and so the new board that's just coming out, in fact, I'm supposed to get mine in the mail tomorrow. Ubuntu came out, and they have an official, what do they call it? It's like a preview release. You literally have to go download it off of Google Drive. But it is official from Ubuntu, and they've got support for that one. And so we're kind of hoping that, one of these is going to be good enough that it sort of gains, really we're waiting for critical mass for one of these particular boards.
Yeah, it's mostly about Ubuntu. They've had images for multiple other Risc-v boards too.
Mm-hmm. They're trying to make it work.
All right, don't let me interrupt. I just wanted to say hi and congratulations. And if you keep it up for another 55 shows, maybe you'll get a name.
Ooh.
I actually really like Untitled Linux Show.
It's fun. It's fun.
I know you wanted to name Jonathan from day one, but I kind of like it.
Well, I wanted a name, and then that became the joke. There for a while, we had a different name like per episode. We would pick one or two of them, and that would be like our subline.
You could have a title for each show.
We have that too.
That's fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the name, I mean, it's such a good name now, and it's
definitely stuck down.
Yeah,
it's definitely ours forever now.
Yeah, I think most of us voted to keep that pretty early on.
Yes.
Yeah, good. I remember the poll, and that won overwhelmingly.
Well, I didn't vote in the poll. I wanted you to get to do your thing. So,
yep.
Anyway, continue on. Don't let me interrupt.
Maybe you should start planning, Leo, to be on the episode 255.
I will be there for 255, or as we know it, Hex 1 or 0, whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Hex 1000.
Yeah,
I'll look forward to it. And keep up the great work. We really appreciate it. I'm watching from afar.
Appreciate it. Yeah. We enjoy it.
Appreciate your watching.
Take care.
All right, man.
Bye.
All right.
On with the show.
On with the show. Jeff, we're going to talk about Nvidia. What's new with the Nvidia, the driver in particular, right?
Yeah. So last week, amidst a flood of tech news, one story that just didn't get that much attention was Nvidia's release of the 575 beta driver. So it's the beginning of their 575 series of GPU drivers. So this is still beta. But they'll build upon this after this first one is stabilized. Now, this update introduces several new features, including NVIDIA smooth motion support for GLX, font buffer rendering on X-Wayland, and compatibility with the NV_disable_explicit_sync environmental variable. And these enhancements also extend to GLX and Vulkan applications. Now, for those unfamiliar, smooth motion is somewhat like DLSS, using AI to generate interpolated frames. Mm-hmm. However, unlike DLSS, it works on games that don't natively support it, so offering improved frame rates and smoother gameplay. It's actually very similar to AMD's fluid motion frames, or AFMF. So just AI, faster frames, better playing. Now, of course, no update is complete without bug fixes, and this release addresses several issues, including a Minecraft crash that has now been resolved, along with a crash on Marvel's Rivals. There was a Wayland extension bug that previously caused system hangs, and that's been taken care of. A prime render offload issue that prevented it from functioning correctly has been fixed. A VRR bug, so it's variable refresh rate, that interfered with EDID overrides on certain interfaces. That was a little more of a corner case, but that's also been taken care of. There's a fix for default TGP and max TGP values not being reported correctly in the settings control panel when running on a notebook systems on battery power. And there's a resolution for crashes caused by render offload in KDE Framework 6. So, and now this is just take heed here for those on older systems. If you're running a kernel earlier than 6.8, be aware that several extensions have been dropped to avoid exceeding the DRM object max property limit. I'm not going to read off the list of extensions because it put everybody to sleep, but just be aware that an older kernel, they're having an issue with the object limit, so they've had to eliminate several extensions. I'm actually using the 575 beta driver right now, and so far everything seems stable. No crashes, no black screen. Some of the computational stuff I do, like folding at home works. So far, it's been a seamless upgrade. However, keep in mind that this is a beta driver, so if your system crashes, you've been warned. Now, for more details, check out the link in the show notes, which includes a direct link to NVIDIA's official release, which is going to have every single change that they did to this driver. But so far, the 575 series looks like it's very solid and good to go.
I remember some of the fun bugs that we've talked about with the NVIDIA drivers. Like once upon a time, you had to move your mouse rapidly across the screen to be able to see updates. Yeah. And
I think we could blame Plasma a little more for that early one than maybe
NVIDIA. That was totally NVIDIA's fault.
No black screen, no blue screen either then?
No.
Cool.
No. Just my normal backdrop. And it's kind of interesting because I didn't look into it for Linux, but I know on the Windows side there were some people having problems with the 570 series of drivers. There were some recent driver updates that have really caused a lot of problems, and so there was some people saying either back off that series or jump to the 575 beta, and that fixes the issues. Mm-hmm. So far so good. I'll let you know if I run into any issues, but it's working great for now.
Yeah. All right, very good. So I want to talk about yet another bit of controversy. In fact, two bits of controversy.
Oh, great.
These are yeah. No, these are more technical controversies. It's fun kernel stuff, really. So let's see how to begin this. So GCC just did a release of GCC 15, and in fact, in just the last couple of days. GCC 15 came out very, very recently. Fedora 42 came out not terribly long ago either, but before GCC 15 actually went fully stable. And Linus Torvalds famously runs Fedora. And Linus did not listen to our advice. I told everybody, wait a week. Don't jump to Fedora 42 right away. Wait a week for things to calm down. He did not wait the week. And it meant that he ended up running GCC 15 before it was fully released, which is interesting considering that he's the kernel guy. So GCC 15 has a new feature. It's actually a really useful feature. So you kind of have to get into some C stuff, C lore to understand this. If you declare a string, so the way this works in C is that a string is an array of characters. And so you would say something like char my string, and then in brackets, you have a number. And that is the number of bytes in the string, like the maximum number of bytes that you want that string to be able to store. Well, you can also immediately initialize it and say, I want that string to equal, and then give it like a string literal, in quotation marks. So the write-up that I've got here, I've got linked to it. It uses the example of char foo, and then in brackets 8 equals bar. Okay, well, that's perfectly fine. You're only using 3 bytes plus 1 for the null terminator, because that's the way strings work in C. So you're using 4 bytes, but you tell the compiler, I want you to go ahead and reserve 8 bytes. All is well. It'll kind of automatically do the right thing. Well, also valid in C is a second example here. Char foo in brackets 8 equals null-free. So NUL-FREE. And if you count that up, that is a total of 8 characters. And that is totally legal to do in C. And what the compiler will do for you is it will take 8 characters and it will put your 8 bytes, your 8 characters into it. And it will not add the null terminator at the end, because you told it that you wanted an array of only 8 bytes, not 9. And the compiler kind of assumes, at least it did until GCC 15, the compiler assumes that you know what you're doing when you're writing code, which is not always a safe assumption. And that's kind of what the compiler people figured. And so they've added this big warning that, hey, you didn't leave enough room in your array for the null terminator. You probably didn't mean to do that, which is great. That's going to save people from doing dumb things with memory and causing program crashes. The problem is that sometimes you actually want to do that and you don't want a null terminator. And it turns out that happens a lot in the kernel. And so what happened here is Linus Torvalds updated to Fedora 42, updated by virtue of going to Fedora 42 to GCC 15, compiled the kernel, and got about 1 billion warning messages about all of these strings that are not null terminated because you don't have enough, you didn't make them large enough. And so he, right before pushing out an RC, said, oh, I'll fix this, and slapped together a quick little patch to fix it. The problem is that his quick little patch to fix it broke kernel compilation on anything previous to GCC 15, which was not even released at the time. It's great. Things were a little bit of a mess there in kernel land. It broke, it got backed out, they fixed it. There's a hilarious note from Keys Cook. That said, the note says, I just lost it. Let me pull it back up here. I've totally lost it. Where did it go? Here it is. He says, can you revert this mess and use what's already been planned for this warning? Once again, it's really frustrating when you update to unreleased computer versions. But he also says, you didn't search lore, kind of the kernel documentation. You didn't search lore for this warning string. You mercilessly flame maintainers for doing much, much less than this. I thought that was hilarious. It's like, Linus, you would give us so much grief if one of us did this to you, and you did this to all of us. Have at least a little bit of grief. It is hilarious. It's been fixed. It's not an ongoing problem. Like, nobody's computers are going to crash because of this. It's just a little look at sort of the technical back and forth that happens in the kernel. And then there was one other, speaking of the kernel and Torvalds, there was one other really fun story here. Bcache FS, one of the up and coming file systems in the kernel, is looking to fix their support for case insensitive file systems. And now this is one of these things that really trip up Windows people when they come to Linux for the first time, because over in Windows, and it has been this way ever since, like, I think the original IBM PC way back in the day. Case insensitive. You know, your file names, they did not have a case with them, so you could capitalize the first name of the file, didn't have to capitalize it, whatever, it would still find it. Windows is still to this day case insensitive. And that is a problem sometimes, particularly when you're doing things in Wine, because you have a executable that thinks that case does not matter, and then you put it on a file system where case does matter. And in fact, there's been some fun game breakages over the years because of that particular issue. So the engineers from Valve are actually working on being able to do things like run a Bcache FS file system that is case insensitive for doing things like the Steam Deck and Steam machines. So anyway, they were working on this, and they broke things. And Torvalds' response was, the only lesson to be learned is that file system people never learn. Case insensitive names are horribly wrong, and you shouldn't have done them at all. The problem wasn't the lack of testing. The problem was implementing it in the first place. The problem is then compounded by, and in quotes, trying to do it right, and in the process doing it horribly wrong indeed, because right doesn't exist. But trying will make random bytes have very magical meaning. And so part of this is not only you're talking about the ASCII system, but then you have Unicode, and what happens if you try to make Unicode case insensitive. And so there's all this problem of like, well, you're trying to the huge Unicode set, because in modern file systems, you could have Unicode characters inside of file names and folder names. Well, do you then want to try to collapse that down to a smaller set of characters, which is essentially what case insensitiveness is? And that's just, it's a very difficult problem to solve. All right. So Torvalds gets onto them for this. They
just need to compile it with an unreleased compiler, and it'd be all right.
Yeah, that happened too. He basically says that a case insensitive is it was always a bug. It's always been a bug. It will always be a bug, and you shouldn't do this. You're bad for doing it, and you should feel bad for trying to do it. I mean, it's pretty special. But yeah, the normal amounts of chaos in the Linux kernel.
Well, and we did talk about GCC a while back between when we benchmarked Ubuntu and Fedora, and it runs a little. The GCC 15 runs a little slower because the first part of the release, they're just throwing features in, and they haven't had a chance to optimize and really refine. And so it's not too surprising that a brand new feature release could, not go quite smoothly.
That is pretty embarrassing, though, compiling something like the Linux kernel for everybody on an unreleased compiler.
Yeah, so there's people have made the point, and I actually agree with this, that something that is really, really missing at the kernel is a continuous integration suite that, is like required to be run before Linux ships out a release. And I think that would be a great idea. Now, trying to do a full-blown CI suite and CI runs for the kernel would be a huge undertaking. But having a small continuous integration suite that when he says, all right, it's time to release, here's the code I want to release, it then throws it out to a couple of different systems and basically says, give me a minimal compile of this. It would only take a few seconds On fast systems these days, you can compile the kernel in under a minute, no problem. Do a kind of sanity check compile before you do a release. I think that makes sense. I like having that on the projects that I'm a part of, some sort of CI run, because I know I'm going to mess up. And even if your name is Linus Torvalds, apparently you will mess up from time to time. And CI can help you not have egg on your face when that happens.
Well, how about the case insensitive argument here? What are your thoughts? You both, I mean,
I don't care whether the file system. I mean, I'm used to case sensitive because of Linux. I understand that when you're trying to port Windows games over, sometimes it's not case sensitive, and that causes problems. It is not terribly offensive to me to have a Linux file system that is case insensitive. It's weird, but I'm not offended by it in quite the same way that Torvald seems to be.
I'm totally against it because it just totally goes against the grain of now you just have that extra layer of complexity versus here's how all the other Linux file systems, Unix file systems work. Now we're going to try to match Windows.
It could break things on Linux and Unix if you have two different files that are the same name but different cases.
Yeah, I don't know that there would be any support for trying to do like an actual system install to a case insensitive file system. That sounds like a terrible idea. I will agree with you. That sounds like a terrible idea.
And you can have multiple file systems on your machine.
Absolutely.
And I would just stick with the case sensitivity and be done with it. So
how then do you fix Windows software that is written? No, so like as somebody like Valve, or even just a wine developer in general, how do you fix Windows software that is written to not be case sensitive?
So my point, I'm just gonna jump in and give my perspective. I think the default should stay with the normal how it's been for years. Keep
Agreed.
It case sensitive. Have that to be the default. Now I don't know how you implement it, but maybe have a feature where you can throw some kind of flag in there to say insensitive. I mean that's already in programming languages, but maybe there's some way you could do that at a file system level. So that way, by default, it's not, but you could throw something in there when you want to access a file system.
I think that essentially is what the bcachefs feature is. You would have to do it at the file system creation time. I don't think you could do it at the time of mounting, because then you could potentially have conflicts on the created file system. So I think it would have to be when you create the file system, you would have to determine, I want this to be case insensitive or not.
I mean, you can do things like grep case insensitive. So, I mean, if all you want to do is find that file name and use that file, in a way, that's kind of all the software needs to do. It's like, instead of open file for whatever feature, it's open file case insensitive.
Yeah, I think the big thing with the file system is when you go to create it, it needs to simplify down to all lowercase, and then the big feature is when you then go to try to create another file, it would have to prevent you from creating the second file that would collide with the file names. And so that's why also you can't have this as a feature that you turn on at mount time, because you could potentially have two different files that have different cases, but other than that, it's the same file name. And so when you try to mount it, then what is the file system supposed to do? Because now it has these two separate files that are, in our new case insensitive paradigm, it's the same file name.
It picks the lowercase one by default. Just
every time you go to access the file, it should just randomly pick one of them.
I mean, because it's very rare. Like I gave the example of you had two files of the same name, but one's capital, one's not. It's rare, very rare to have that and need that. Usually, if that's the case, it's because you made a mistake. Probably.
Yeah.
Well, and also going back to your example of like Valve having to deal with Windows file systems. The difference there, where it's case insensitive, you have a very direct boundary that you're dealing with a Windows file system, you know what it is, where, okay, now you've got a Linux file system, but now ext4 and ZFS and all the other ones now have to figure out, okay, what mode's it running in? Now it's got to handle all the, now it just muddies the water versus there's a very clear boundary between the Windows, NTFS and FAT32 and all the versions.
I got the easy fix. You could have this based off of directory. This could be like a directory flag. And all it does is if this directory has a flag to be case insensitive, everything in it at the actual file level changes to all lowercase. And whenever anything accesses it, it only looks for lowercase. It's case insensitive.
There you go.
And it doesn't have to mess with the whole file system. You just need to do it directory based. Boom. Easy fix.
Easy fix. Rob's got the answer.
Hope you're listening.
All right. Rob, do you have the answer to virtualization?
I have an answer, and it's the best answer. So, as I said, another one of my favorite pieces of software has hit a milestone.
Yeah.
And yes, this is that it's a version number, is that QEMU has released version 10.0. So there's been a lot of software hitting 10.0 lately, it seems like. So QEMU, for those that don't know, it's the open source emulator that powers many virtual machines and Linux from the backbone of Proxmox working with KVM QEMU, or LXD and Incus, the developer who we've had on Floss Weekly recently. These anyway. Okay, so it powers that, and many online VM cloud providers also use QEMU in their chain. So I don't know if it's the most popular, but in the open source world, I'm fairly certain it's the most popular. I know there's VirtualBox, there's VMware, there's the commercial alternatives to it, but if you're looking at open source, QEMU is the one you're going to be using. So, in the words of the great Marius Nestor that Ken loves to quote all the time, this release promises to boost x86, ARM64, RISC-V, HPPA, 390X, and long arch emulation with new features and many improvements. So among these key improvements includes, so I'm back to my words, I'm no longer quoting, faster emulation of string instructions on the x86, Clearwater Forest and Sierra Forest -V2 x86 CPU models, true multi-queue support for the VirtIO SCSI or SCSI device, a new handshake max seconds optional parameter to NBD server start QMD command, and new Apple-GFX-PCI and Apple-GFX-MMIO devices to provide accelerated graphics to macOS guests. And I'm gonna have to spin up my Mac VM to test this one out. For the ARM users, this release adds support for emulating the FEAT AFP, FEAT RPRES, and FEAT _XS CPU architectures, which I don't know what any of those are, but some ARM architectures, along with many other ARM improvements. There's a lot there, and it's just a bunch of alphabet soup, so I'm not going to list stuff. If you're into ARM and want to know the details, look at the show notes, find the articles, find the stuff on it. So also back at the RISC-V world that we've been talking about so much lately, or off and on at least, there are multiple RISC-V features added, such as support for Tenstorrent Ascalon CPU, Microblaze 5 generic board support, and support for the RV64 Shanghan Nanhu CPU. a bunch of more CPU stuff that I haven't heard of, along with the other Risc-v editions. And really, there's just a lot of new things in here to look forward to. The release, this release has something for everybody. ARM, x86, Risc-v. Personally, I'm just looking forward to any speed increases I may see in my VMs, and I like to see how those added Apple bits improve that scenario. It's not something I'm actually actively using, but I play around with the VM, so of course I have one that I tried running that kind of stuff on. And one thing I've seen is, depending on, I don't know what kind of things maybe I have set wrong. I've had some where it just likes to freeze up, and others seems like it works okay-ish. And sometimes it works great. I don't know what the scenarios are. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But maybe with these QEMU improvements, it'll just work all better and faster everywhere.
Lots of stuff happening under the hood there.
It's a big list.
So it is a big
list of alphabet soup.
So if Rob says Marius Nestor instead of Ken, do we still take a drink?
I'll leave that to your discretion.
Yeah, I did the opposite. You got to spit out
tea.
whatever you have to spit out whatever you're drinking.
No thanks. Yeah, fun stuff there. I am particularly interested in the VirtIO SCSI, because that is that's your disk performance. And I don't know about you guys, but my playing around with virtual machines, disk performance has always been terrible. Now that may be because I always insist on running on RAID 6 on spinning drives and not Flash, but still, it's been terrible.
Well, RAID 6, how many cores are you throwing at that virtual machine to run RAID 6?
Well, the virtual machine doesn't. The virtual machine is not doing the RAID 6. It's the bare metal machine above it that actually has to do the RAID 6 calculations.
Oh, okay.
So
you need to emulate solid state drives or something, maybe.
There you go. Just add that. We'll put that in QEMU 11.
It's a checkbox in Proxmox.
Emulate solid state.
I haven't done any testing to know if it does it, but I always check it because it sounds good to me. It sounds faster.
It's like painting it red or adding blue LEDs. Totally makes it go faster.
I mean, in theory, they should. I mean, I don't know why it's just not checked by default, which it's not, surprisingly.
I'm imagining the actual code path. If you go to the source code, it doesn't do anything. And there's a comment like, "Get a load of these idiots."
If I ever get back to writing software, I'm going to do that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah,
improve performance checkbox.
Yep. All right, Jeff, what is Looking Glass? I've wondered this ever since I saw your link here. What is this about?
Well, this is going to build upon Rob's story, and you talk about disk performance being poor on a virtual machine, but what about graphical performance? I always found it pretty bad. Mm-hmm. Well, now I will tell you, this story is going to be heading down a bit of a rabbit hole, but in the interest of keeping things concise and making sure most of our audience stays engaged, I don't want to bore everybody, we're going to keep it kind of high level here. Now, the link in the show notes is from a YouTube video by Level 1 Techs, Wendell from Level 1 Tech specifically, and he has a YouTube channel dedicated to Linux called Level 1 Linux. And that's what the link is. And in this particular video, he's talking about Looking Glass. He mentions that a major VFIO breakthrough is coming. Now, what is VFIO? VFIO stands for Virtual Function Input Output. It's a subsystem in the Linux kernel that provides a way to expose direct device access to user space applications and virtual machines. In simple terms, its main purpose is to allow a virtual machine to securely and efficiently access hardware devices while ensuring isolation between them and the host system. Now, this works alongside virtual machine software like QEMU and KVM. So it's not a virtual machine in and of itself, it supports the virtual machine. So why does VFIO matter? Well, it has several applications. Multi-seat gaming. You can take a single machine with multiple virtual machines and now multiple users can game simultaneously. Running multiple instances of a game, useful in certain situations. Operating system compatibility. If a game requires Windows, VFIO allows you to run it inside of virtual machines at speeds close to native performance because you're hitting the GPU directly and you're not having an emulation layer in the middle trying to do the graphics. You actually have the hardware doing it. It's also used for security and sandboxing, running applications at a virtual machine at near native speeds. But by doing that, you add an extra layer of protection against malware. So if you're running some software, maybe you're not sure of, or you're really testing out, that could be a way to protect it. And of course, experimentation and learning, and it allows tech enthusiasts to explore virtualization and in its advanced features. Now let's get back to the video. So Looking Glass is nearing its 1.0 release, and Wendell's excited about achieving full-speed GPU acceleration. Pardon me. He also mentions that even if you don't pass through a dedicated GPU, Looking Glass can use your CPU to simulate one. And thanks to multi-core support, the performance will be much better than the standard VGA drivers typically used in virtual machines. These default drivers are usually restricted to a single core and aren't well optimized. So while Looking Glass provides far better performance, it still won't be as good as a real GPU. So if you're really going to try to game and you want the best, you have to have a GPU that the system can hit. Wendell does note that Looking Glass is easiest to install on Arch Linux, which was kind of what it was designed around or built on. It's not only limited there. It can be installed, for example, on Debian-based distributions. It's just the process is more complex. Now, the community has created scripts to help with the installation on Arch anyway, and usage. There could be some Ubuntu ones out there. I didn't go digging. But, there's still some challenges right now. It's possible for Looking Glass to cause a GPU lockup requiring a full system shutdown and power cycle to restore functionality. While this functionality loss, it's not going to permanently damage your GPU. You're not going to brick it, nothing like that. It's just going to require extra steps to get things running smoothly, and the extra steps being the, shut it down and then power it off, let it come back. And so it's not perfectly smooth yet. And if you're running Arch or thinking this might be good to run on Arch, you're probably not a new user. This is not in new user state yet. But if you're interested in this soon to be coming breakthrough, check out the video linked in the show notes. There's also underneath the video, there's a forum post covering the release details on the Level 1 Tech's website. And they also have a link to the official Looking Glass website. And, kind of capstoning this whole thing is Wendell mentions in the video, exploring VFIO can be a real long, but, a very rewarding journey. So it's a lot to look forward to.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. I've fiddled with this just a tiny bit, not Looking Glass, but trying to do this sort of thing before. We have an interesting comment. I think it's something we should cover. Tenacious Liege, possibly, says, "I smell something proprietary," and that's an interesting question. Is Looking Glass a proprietary or an open source solution? Do you know?
I believe it's open source.
That's what I'm seeing too. So they're at github.com/gnif/lookingglass. And I saw some instructions on their website about how to compile it from source. So I think it is an open source solution. It appears to be to me. Cool.
I've had Looking Glass bookmarked for a long time. Like I probably heard about this over a year ago, but I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. I thought about bringing it to the story in the past, but it was really early. But I want to be able to try it first, really, to know. And I could, like, maybe it's because it's designed to work best on Arch, and I'd really like to see it have a nice little plug-in to like Proxmox or something.
Now, with Looking Glass, I think it's designed, and you touched on this, but really it's designed for running with two different GPUs, right?
Yeah. ideally, because you can't. The consumer GPUs that most of us are running, they don't allow you to bisect them, so you can't break them in half and use one part for something and one part for something else. There's some kind of workarounds that sometimes work, but they try to not do that because that they try to reserve that for their professional cards.
Yep.
But the hardware is perfectly capable of it, both AMD and Nvidia's hardware.
Yeah, the term there is SR-IOV, single root IOV, yeah, I think Intel is the only one that like really supports it for consumer cards with their drivers and everything.
Now, you could say you're going to run your desktop off of your integrated GPU, maybe, and then say, okay, I'm going to dedicate my graphics card to my virtual machine so I can play, and then you can switch back and forth. I mean, I think there's a reboot involved to do that, but Wendell goes in and talks about, he's running some games at pretty high speed. Now, there's still a little overhead because it's a virtual machine, so it's not going to be faster than Windows but I mean, you're running pretty respectable frame rates. And it's 80-90% of the performance of just running Windows.
Well, I guess instead of going to a Cosmic Desktop, I guess I have to go back to Arch to explore this.
I guess. Give him a week. He'll be bragging about, hey, I run Arch, by the way, guys. I haven't mentioned I run Arch. Let me bring stories about Arch. Yeah.
Enough about myself. Let's talk about me.
Yes. Yes. So I've got 3 little stories here, all about kind of some neat video stuff coming, and they tie into that fairly interestingly. So the first one is again something Valve is working on. It's the Fair DRM scheduler, and they have posted their version 4 patch set and said that it's running well on the Steam Deck. And this is pretty interesting to me. This is when you have multiple applications that want to hit your GPU at the same time, and specifically when they all want to like write to video at the same time. And what usually will happen, at least with the current setup, is one of them will run great and the other will be starved for GPU time, essentially. And so they have added this. It's basically based on the completely fair scheduler, the CFS from the kernel, and it now is added to the GPU so that you can render multiple things at the same time. And you might ask yourself, what's the use case for this? Why does Valve care about it? I'm not 100% sure, but one thing that does come to mind is the Steam overlay is sort of doing this, where it's trying to render something on top of where a game is rendering. And that might be a big part of what they're trying to fix. But anyway, it was very interesting to see this coming along. And, once it gets perfected, it's very possible we'll see it start landing in other distros maybe on our Fedora and Ubuntu desktops, etc. And then there is a little tidbit from AMD. They're working on the GIM driver, GIM, or is that GIM? Which is the GPU IOV module, which is for virtualization with Instinct accelerators, Instinct being their big sort of workstation / server cards. But there was an interesting comment. It was on X. Someone says, bring SR-IOV support to the client discrete GPU, please. It would be a great add-on feature to differentiate AMD. And one of their engineers says it's in the roadmap. So we might see at some point in the future wider SR-IOV support for more AMD cards, maybe even the consumer cards at some point in the future. Not a guarantee. They say it's in the roadmap, and that's not in and of itself a very detailed promise even. It's a very weak promise and a very sort of undetailed generic promise. But there are at least people at AMD thinking about it. So we'll take it as a win, a minor win, and hope to see something real come out of that. And then the third video thing that caught my eye looking through is the Raspberry Pi 5. The upstreaming support for that is continuing to come along. And this one actually, I believe, is Raspberry Pi 4 and 5. And it's the accelerated decoder for HEVC, also known as H.265. There is silicon on those chips, on those boards for accelerated decoding. And it is not landed upstream in the kernel yet, but it was the work was done, and it's been open sourced. And the people that did it, which I believe is it Igalia? I don't see it immediately, but the work has been done. It's open source, and they just sent the version 3 patch series up to the kernel, which is a good sign for that maybe landing at some point. Interestingly, it was sent from an @raspberrypi.com address. There's been some feedback, lots of little fiddly things like don't add mailing lists as a maintainer. Maintainers must be people, right? Fun things like that, just sort of little fiddly kernel things. So we will see if this version of it lands, whether it's going to be quite a bit of change to make it happen, but it looks like that is coming, which, if you are like me and you want to run mainline distros with vanilla kernels on your Raspberry Pi SBCs, that is very welcome to see. That code is going upstream. So fun stuff there. Fun stuff. Any thoughts? Nope.
I just love I just love how much, Proton and Steam or Valve are just really contributing a lot to the gaming experience.
Yes. All because Microsoft thought it would be really cool to make their own console and then try to lock games into games for Windows.
Yep. That started the panic.
Yep. And Gabe was like, nope, I'm not playing that game. Fun stuff. All right, so we get into some command line tips.
We shall.
I think that's an excellent idea.
Rob is up first, and Miss Pipe,
Ms. Pipe, that's her name. So I am continuing on my More Utils series. Now this one is going to take a little bit of thought of how this might be useful to you. In most places, a regular pipe is going to work, but in scripting purposes, maybe you want to get the result. So the example here is if I were to grep the word error from a log file, and then I wanted to pipe that to sort, it's going to work just fine. Now, what if I want to know if that first command, I want to know if that grep was successfully completed or errored out. And I want to be able to use that in my script to determine what to do next or whatever. That's where mispipe would come in. So mispipe, so it pipes it and gives you it returns true or false or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I'll just show you for an example here. So if I type mispipe, that's MISPIPE space double quote grep space single quote error single quote space some file.log double quote and then space and then put double quote sort double quote. And some file.log is a log file that I just copied to the current directory for demonstration purposes. So if I run that, I need to make sure I'm over here on this screen here. So if I run that, it's going to grep that file, search that file for anything with the word error in it, and then sort it. So it returned successful. So if I type echo space $? It's going to give me a 0. And that means it's a successful response. So now if I'm going to do the same thing, I'm going to put a word that's not in there. I have error SSSSSS. And same command, because I know that's not in there. So it doesn't spit anything out because it's not in there. Now, if I want to check, echo space $? It returns a 1, meaning that it did not, that first command there did not successfully complete. So how you use this, it's really probably going to be best for scripting, but how you use this, I'm going to leave that up to you. Now, one thing you notice here, I started a bonus tip here, but if you saw I did the echo, the $? That's a special variable, which I'm going to deep dive and expand on next week. Some of those special variables I think have been hit on, but I'm going to do a deep dive and explain that a little deeper. But this week it's mispipe.
So specifically what mispipe does is it returns it gives you the return value of the first command as opposed to the second command.
Yes. That is what it does.
Cool. Yeah, I could see that being useful in certain situations.
Yeah, if you're running some script and you're whatever it is and you're piping it to things that act on that script, like, or whatever command, like sort, you don't care if sort passed or failed. Sort's going to do whatever it does to whatever's piped to it. You really want to know where you're able to find anything and grab.
Yep. Makes sense. Very cool. All right, Jeff, Bitwarden.
Yeah, so if you're a fan of security now, you might have heard Steve Gibson mention Bitwarden as one of the password managers worth considering. It integrates seamlessly into your browser, making logging into websites effortless. But what if you need a password on the command line? Well, Bitwarden actually has a command line interface. So the link in the show notes provides, all the information you need. So there's different ways to install it. You can use NPM, Chocolatey, Homebrew, or Snap. And if none of those options work for you, you can just head over to the download section and grab the standalone executable. No extra package manager needed beyond what you normally have in your distribution. Since I'm on an Ubuntu-based distribution, I simply use the Snap version, and as expected, the installation was smooth. And that's where you can just even start getting into the help options, -- help, and it gives you everything you need, everything you'd expect. You can formatting, retrieving passwords, entering passwords, basically various functions found in the graphical version. So you can now have the power of your graphical password manager on the command line. I won't go over everything, but if you've already been using Bitwarden's graphical interface and, need it on the command line too, this is a great way to keep your password vault at your fingertips. Be sure to check out the article in the show notes for installation details, documentation, and an overall rundown of the program. So be safe, everyone.
Yeah. Added bonus, Bitwarden is a sponsor of TWiT. So there's that.
I knew they were at one time. I wasn't sure if they still were.
It is on the page, twit.tv/sponsors.
Oh, okay.
They're on the page now. So,
and I ran into it because I actually use Bitwarden. That's my.
As do I. I've been a fan of it since before they were a sponsor.
Yes.
I kind of switched to them when a previous competitor might have still been a sponsor.
And then got bought out.
It happens.
Yeah, lots of stuff happened there.
Yeah. I did have a question last week. The reason I was able to get to that page so quickly is because I looked since last week. I was talking about a backup solution. It was actually Backblaze has a way to work right with duplicity. And so I was able to get a customer moved from me to another IT guy, and we were able to move over to his Backblaze account very, very easily because Backblaze actually helps maintain this backend for duplicity, which was very cool. So we enjoyed that. All right. I've got a command line tip, and it's sort of a basic thing about Linux, and that is the quotation marks. So quote marks in Linux are interesting. You have 3 different things that we're going to call quotation marks here. We have the single quote and the double quote. Those are the ones that are over on the right side of your keyboard, right beside the shift button. And then there are the backticks. and that is it shares the key with tilde.
And it's right beside the enter button or return.
The single and the double quotes are, yes.
Yes, not the shift.
It depends on your keyboard, but yeah. So, those all do different things, and there are reasons that you might want to use one or another. So, probably the simplest are the single quotes. And if you use inside a Linux command, if you use single quotes, then you will get everything inside the single quotes gets delivered to the command as a single argument exactly as you write it. So you can put basically any character in there. I think any character other than a single quote will get passed through directly to the command. So exclamation marks, dollar signs, slashes, backticks, double back to, a set of backticks, a set of double quotation marks, whatever it is inside of those single quotation marks, it gets passed through to whatever command that you are running. Double quotation marks, which those are the ones that you would normally use for writing in English to quote someone, they are different. They will pass through whatever is in them, but all of the different string replacement options will work inside of a double quotation mark. So, one of those options is the thing starting with dollar sign, right? And Rob showed us that dollar sign question mark, I believe. So inside of a double quote, I'm pretty sure that dollar sign question mark will do the string replacement. You can do dollar sign parentheses to run a command. That will work. And so this actually tripped me up the other day. We were doing an email migration with a tool, and on this tool, you put the passwords on the command line, and someone's password had an exclamation mark in it. And I was just using double quotes because it's what I normally use. And it did the replacement of the previous command because it's what exclamation mark does by default on Linux. And so it had another command in the middle of this person's password. And it's like, wow, what happened here? It took us a minute to figure it out. And it was quite hilarious when we did. So double quotes, super useful if that's what you wanted to do. Not very useful if that's not what you wanted to do. And then backticks are really very different, very interesting, also very useful. A backtick will run the interior as a command and then do a string replacement where the output of the command is replaced into whatever string you're working with. So, and you can use this for things like if you want to put the current date into a log or even a file name, then you just do backtick and then the date command, close it with the other backtick. And then when you run that command in Bash, the first thing that it will do is it runs the date command, takes the output, replaces that into your longer string, and then runs that command. Again, all three of these are extremely useful for scripting, for writing one-liners, all kinds of stuff. But if you don't understand what each of them do, they will trip you up in hilarious ways sometimes. But now you know. And knowing is half the battle.
I'll say single quote and double quote. It's the same thing when you're doing PHP.
I remember doing some old corn shell scripting on an old Solaris box, and that was always single quote, double quotes were always the thing.
Yeah, I had no. Well, I will just say with the various languages, like do your homework and find out exactly what they mean, because sometimes it will surprise you. It may or may not mean what you think it does. I know in PHP, my use of PHP, I am oftentimes writing out HTML code. And so I will do, double quotes inside of single quotes or single quotes inside of double quotes to be able to get PHP to write out the quotation marks so that the HTML code has it. And I remember a few times that it's like, but I need a third level of quotes because I'm doing JavaScript too. Fun time.
Then you just exit out with a period, or the quote and period, and start a new line or whatever.
Something like that. Yeah, there are ways.
I didn't know about that tick. I'm just playing around with that now on the command line, and cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. I use that quite a bit for like putting a date into a file name. It's really useful for that. There are other ways to do it too. I mean, it's essentially the same thing as $, open close parenthesis. It's one less character to have to type. Yep. All right. That is it. That is the show. That is the tips. I'm going to let each of the guys plug whatever they want to. We're going to let Jeff go first. Maybe he'll have some poetry for us. We will see. Jeff, what do you got?
I have got poetry.
Yay!
So, little haiku here. Kids whining, fighting, swiping iPhone to mute them. There's an app for that? Have a great week, everybody.
That's great. All right, Rob.
All right. If you want to come connect with me, you can find me at robertpcampbell.com. On that page, there's links to my LinkedIn, my Twitter, my Blue Sky, my Mastodon, and a place to donate me a coffee and $5 increments. So, since this is our 200th episode, feel free to donate 200 coffears or $200 worth of coffee, or whichever one of those you prefer. I'm good with them all.
How about 200 pennies worth of coffee?
Whatever. I don't care.
Or remember all the bad puns at the beginning, and specially make note to donate to Jonathan and myself and not Rob.
There you go. Make him owe us more coffee.
Yeah.
Yep. That'd be fun. All right. Thank you guys for being here. It's been a blast.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
All right. If you want more of me, which of course you do, why wouldn't you? You can check out Hackaday. That's where the security column goes live every Friday morning. We have a lot of fun with that. That's also the home of Floss Weekly these days. We record on Tuesday at, 11:30 my time, which is 9:30 Pacific time, and have a lot of fun with that. Record on Tuesday. It goes live on Wednesday. You can find it there at Hackaday, or you can follow the RSS feed, or you can even follow the Floss Weekly YouTube channel where we upload the videos, and that is always fun as well. You should also check out Club TWiT. It is the easiest, the best way to directly support the shows that you love and the network that you appreciate, and it's about the price of a cup of coffee per month. Look, we don't ask for much here. It's a cup of coffee for the network, and then a cup of coffee for each of the hosts. It's not that much. But seriously, you should check out Club TWiT if you are not already a member. And we appreciate everybody being here, those that watch, those that listen, those that get us live, and those that get us on the download. And we'll be back. We'll see you next week on the Untitled Linux Show.